Hello, the NOE Bill Rowlands at Pennaeth End Youth Homelessness Cymru Dwi. My name is Bill Rowlands and I am the head of End Youth Homelessness Cymru, a coalition working towards preventing and tackling youth homelessness across Wales. We have recently published our most recent research, Impossible to Navigate, Youth Homelessness Through the Lens of Neurodiversity, and have decided to record this half an hour or so presentation to take you through the methodology, key findings and recommendations of our research. This presentation will first quickly give you an overview of EYHC, who we are, where we came from and what we do, before taking you through the research, the launch, how we've involved young people throughout the process and what impact we hope we can achieve off the back of this piece of work. So, as I've just said, let me first start with a quick overview of EYHC. EYHC was formed back in 2017 as a result of a successful cross-organisational campaign to end the placement of 16 and 17-year-olds in unsuitable temporary accommodation placements such as B&Bs or hotels. The campaign, fronted by our patron Michael Sheen and coordinated by our chair Fran Beecher, was a success, with statutory guidance being changed to improve the way local authorities worked in regards to young people's housing. The success of the campaign was such that the then First Minister, Carwyn Jones, pledged to end youth homelessness in 10 years in Wales, stating that we have a wonderful opportunity here in Wales to deliver real change. If we can put a man on the moon, then surely we can end youth homelessness in Wales, leading to the creation of EYHC. And since our formation, we've worked tirelessly to change the way that youth homelessness is viewed and addressed, with an unrelenting focus on championing the importance of prevention, working to stop as many young people as possible across Wales from ever coming into contact with the homelessness system. EYHC was formed as and will always be a coalition, and on the screen are the logos of our steering group and coalition members. And we'd like to thank a number of them who were involved directly in helping us form and carry out this research. So in particular, we'd like to extend a massive diolch yn fawr to Amanda Kirby and the youth homeless coordinators from Conwy, Powys and Caerphilly. This is the current EYHC team, myself as the head of, and we're delighted to have recently been joined by both Sean, working as our policy research and engagements coordinator, and Beth, our youth voice and engagement coordinator. They both joined the team at a very busy time for EYHC, but have taken to their respective roles fantastically and have continued to drive our work forward and take EYHC from strength to strength. And at this point, I'd also like just to extend a massive thanks to two of EYHC's previous policy and research officers, Gemma Bridgman and Monica Conti, without whom we would not have a final version of the research that we have today. So, what do we actually do at EYHC? We work across sectors to ensure that we are co-creating solutions for people with lived experience of youth homelessness, service providers, researchers, policymakers and funders. We aim to form partnerships beyond those organisations working directly with young people to increase our influence, to hear fresh ideas and to ensure that systems and structures which can perpetuate youth homelessness are addressed at a much earlier stage. We are inspired by the collective impact model adopted by so many members of the Away Home family, of which we are a part, which focuses on bringing together key cross-sector partners who work collectively to achieve a common or shared goal. There are 4 key ways in which we work towards this common goal of ending youth homelessness. The first is coordinating collective impact. Given the cross-cutting nature of youth homelessness, EYHC looks to operate as a backbone organisation to help inform and coordinate all the different pieces of work going on across sectors and organisations to effectively prevent and tackle youth homelessness. The second is amplifying youth voice, and we believe that this is the most important part of our work. The voices of young people who have lived through homelessness need not only to be heard, but need to drive the changes to policy and practice needed to end youth homelessness. Young people therefore directly influence the work plan and direction of EYHC, but we also ensure that we involve young people in our research as peer researchers and provide a platform for young people to speak directly to decision makers across Wales. The third tenet is research, as we undertake research into youth homelessness. We've explored the situation for particular groups of young people that anecdotally we knew are at a higher risk of facing youth homelessness. So our previous research has explored youth homelessness in the LGBTQ+ community and also for care experienced young people, whilst our roadmap for ending youth homelessness follows a 5-part preventative typology detailing how youth homelessness can be prevented at every stage of this typology. And the fourth tenet is to champion innovation and best practice, shining a light on innovative schemes, projects, or approaches where it has been shown to be promising or effective in preventing or alleviating youth homelessness, either here in Wales or from across the world. And I think what has been so exciting about this particular research, impossible to navigate, and as will become clear throughout the presentation, is that it has really embodied each of these 4 key tenets, and in particular as the voices of young people running throughout it. So, as this research was so heavily influenced by our peer researchers and the young people that we were privileged to work with, we thought it was of paramount importance to launch this research in a way that was accessible for them, rather than putting on an event in a stuffy, grand old building. We were delighted to host the launch to this research, back in December in WID, a neuroqueer-run community library in the centre of Cardiff. We hosted a number of spoken word artists and a drag king, and the event provided an open platform for us to present our findings and facilitate a discussion as to how best we can take our findings forward. We were honoured that the majority of our peer researchers were able to join us, with a number taking part in the panel discussion. And I think it's fair to say that the audience were blown away by a number of the performances and the openness and articulate nature in which the young people spoke about their experiences and what they thought needed to be done. We were privileged to work with spoken word artist Johnny Giles in a bit more detail, and we'd like to start our presentation with a number of his poems. Throughout this presentation, you will see and hear through video and audio clips directly from the young people we were privileged to work with about their experiences. And I just want to take a moment to thank all our peer researchers and the young people who are happy to be interviewed for this project, and the young people supported by Connor Youth Service who are happy to speak on camera about their experiences also. None of this research could have happened without them. So a massive diolch yn fawr,
You change the name of a condition, you don't change the condition. The diagnosis does not change your loved ones nor yourself. It only clarifies what was already evident and yet difficult to accept. The obstacle race, the things in the way, the hurdles you hurdle over each day. Sometimes catch your foot, you fall flat on your face until it's time to get back up again. The earlier the diagnosis, the easier the experience. A recognition of what you already were, and acceptance of what you already are.
So let's start with a quick introduction to neurodiversity. What is neurodiversity? The word neurodiversity is made up of a prefix neuro, which relates to the nervous systems in our brains, and the stem diversity, that is the variation of characteristics within a population. So neurodiversity is the diversity in how our brains and nervous systems function throughout the human population. Everyone's brain functions differently, and there's endless variability in how our brains can function. And it's plain that neurodiversity is an inherent part of human diversity. And it's really important to note here that the purpose of this research was not to be fatalistic about neurodivergent young people's prospective life opportunities at all. The research explored young people's experiences through a social lens, in line with the Welsh Government's commitment to the social model of disability. This means we start from an acceptance that our society, systems and services are predominantly designed with a neurotypical brain in mind, which thus marginalises and fails to meet the needs of many neurodivergent people. We consider neurodivergent young people's experience in relation to wider societal structures, therefore, rather than solely focusing on the individual. A number of young people we spoke to mentioned how alienated and marginalised the current systems made them feel, which is a result of us as a society being designed with neurotypical people in mind. And when talking about neurodiversity, using the correct language is key. Society at large is neurodiverse, while an individual who's autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic, or has ADHD, Tourette's, or any combination of these is considered neurodivergent. So if we look at the 3 key terms, neurodiverse describes the diversity and variation of cognitive functioning of a group, e.g. our planet has a neurodiverse population, or we have a neurodiverse team. Neurodivergent describes an individual whose neurocognitive functioning is not considered typical, and this includes but is not limited to individuals who are autistic, dyspraxic, dyslexic, or have ADHD, Tourette's syndrome, developmental language disorder, etc. And the neurotypical describes an individual with a more typical neurocognitive function or traits that fit with society's norm. It's important to note neurodivergent traits here, as there may be individuals who don't consider themselves to be neurodivergent, but who may still show traits that are considered to be neurodivergent. And as mentioned before, we are privileged to work with a number of young people from Connoy through Connoy Youth Service to talk about their everyday experiences of being neurodivergent. The following video shows what being neurodivergent means to them.
Today I'll be talking about my sister who has ADHD, autism and tics. It's more of an ability than a disability because otherwise they get dissed, and when it's a positive, and it's because it's a positive thing because it's okay to be different.
Neurodiversity is a part of me. It's a part of my identity as a human being. To me, it's both a good and a bad thing. It makes me more resilient in life, but at the same time, it makes me tired all the time and physically weaker than the average person.
Hi, my name is Ewan Roberts and I've been diagnosed with autism since mid-2019. Firstly, really for me, it doesn't really mean that much to me. I do see it sort of, I don't see it as a disability as much as you see it as a thing that is just there in my life. It makes me different, of course, from normal people. And it makes me very funny, of course.
So let me now turn to our research, Impossible to Navigate, Youth Homelessness Through the Lens of Neurodiversity. So why do we do this research and how? Why? Well, we've gathered a lot of anecdotal evidence over the years, both from young people we've spoken to and also from practitioners who noticed a trend within their locality. And it became apparent that neurodiverse young people were potentially at both an increased risk of youth homelessness, but were also thought to be additionally disadvantaged, as services are built with neurotypical people in mind. The purpose of this research, therefore, was to gain a better understanding of the intersection between neurodiversity and youth homelessness, and as always at EYHC, the amplification of youth voice was key. But importantly, in line with exploring a solutions-focused and collaborative approach, we also wanted to learn about the experiences of practitioners working within the system, as well as the experience of young people going through the system. So how do we do it? Well, from the start, a participatory approach was key. 4 neurodivergent young people were recruited and trained in research methods, and they were involved from the outset in the research, from setting the parameters of research and what they thought was worthy of investigation and how they wanted to do it. And we are really proud that all of our peer researchers continue to be involved in the dissemination of this research. As I mentioned, they all joined us for the WID launch, and we've taken this research to a number of conferences and provided a platform to young people to speak directly about their experiences of both going through the homelessness system, but also about being part of this research. And I'm delighted to say we're taking this research to the Senedd to take the research directly to decision makers in Wales, and a number of peer researchers will be there with us talking directly to the decision makers. In regards to data collection, the data collection looked like 12 interviews with young people conducted by peer researchers and 60 survey responses from practitioners, and a number of workshops with practitioners going into more detail about their experiences. And after the initial findings were uncovered, we hosted a recommendations workshop with young people and practitioners to work collaboratively to put together a list of recommendations. It's easy for me to tell you about the impact we think that we've had in providing an opportunity for engagement to our peer researchers, and on the next slide you can hear directly from them about their involvement.
I'm seriously considering getting a job working in youth homelessness and or research. So I think that's just a quick sort of answer, but it shows how effective this is being. So I've always been curious, I've always wanted to change things, but I never had to do it in this way before. Sort of, there's been some projects where you can sort of say your opinion or you can campaign or you can advocate, but it's different because we were involved in the research from step 1 and we're going to be until the very end.
I've considered for the first time in my life actually moving to Cardiff. So I'm going to be part of another project, it's a youth music project with Anthem. And I think I wouldn't have applied for that without having this. I wouldn't have felt the confidence. I wouldn't have felt like I was sort of like adequate or experienced enough or really worth it actually, without having done this. Yeah. So I think it's opened up so many new opportunities for me that I never would have envisaged. And I now know that I could do research again and say, I have this experience. And as well, like, when you're making connections with people, like, they sort of ask you what's your thing, what do you do? And I never really have much to say, but I can say this now, and it's just been like so important for me.
So, if we turn to the first section of research, the first section that our peer researchers wanted to explore the everyday challenges that neurodiverse young people can face. The young people we spoke to's everyday challenges of navigating relationships, school, health services, employment, everyday life can be characterized into four key themes: emotions, social interactions, cognitive functions, and sensory issues.
It really affects the sleep pattern, which then affects everyone in the house, and obviously it's not good when that happens because we all need our own sleep and to be able to wake up in the morning. Barriers would be she needs to have support when getting ready because it can be a bit of a fight of a morning to get her ready from her pyjamas into her school uniform. Obviously that's a change there which she doesn't really cope well with. Society doesn't understand that neurodiverse people need a safe space to self-regulate.
What barriers I sort of, I don't see the barrier though. One of the things people seem like weird is that I talk to myself a lot, just way too many times. And even sometimes I talk way too much, and my mum calls it verbal diarrhea or something like that. And it's just, it makes like me feel, of course, funny as heck, and also makes me understand myself way more when I'm talking out loud, so I can just get my feelings out there.
Being neurodivergent makes it difficult to live with others due to the rules being set by people and the fact that the rules are different to mine. And sadly, being neurodivergent has made me face barriers that no other person would have faced. That being unable to work or make friends due to the neurodivergency. I do want to work and I do want to make friends, and I want to be able to live like everyone else and still be who I am. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
And as you can see from the quotes on the screen, the young people we spoke to mentioned a number of impairments that they face in their day-to-day life. I'll just pause now for a second to allow you to read some of these quotes off the screen. So the second area that our peer researchers wanted to look at in more detail was the varied and numerous pathways into youth homelessness. And from our data collection, we found there are 3 salient causes of youth homelessness for neurodivergent young people. Family breakdown, we know, is a key cause of youth homelessness for all young people. However, our research found that neurodivergent young people are at an amplified risk for the following factors. Family neurodivergence. We know that neurodivergent conditions can often be inherited, meaning that if one young person is neurodivergent, it is likely that parents or siblings may also be. When support needs are not met, this can add strain on the family unit, leading to family breakdown. And I want to make this as clear as possible, but we are not by any means saying that neurodivergent people make bad parents. Rather, it suggests that barriers such as a lack of support or even a lack of diagnosis can add pressure to the family unit. This in turn can increase the incidence of adverse childhood experiences for neurodivergent young people and lead to eventual family breakdown and homelessness. Secondly, and this is one of the more upsetting parts of conducting the research, was that we found that many young people face ableist abuse and alienation within their own families, with young people explaining that they are seen as the black sheep of a family. We found that this is a particular issue when neurodivergent young people grow up in neurotypical families. Their needs are often not understood or met, leaving them vulnerable to experiencing emotional distress, trauma, and eventual family breakdown. And thirdly, we found that there was a lack of support for parents to help meet the need of their children that acted as an additional barrier. This could later develop into more complex problems which parents struggle to manage, and in turn, their situations evolved where they had to ask their neurodivergent young people to leave the family home, particularly if they felt there was a risk to their siblings' well-being. In regards to foster placement breakdown, a number of the young people we spoke to were care experienced and had become homeless when leaving the foster care system. Their experience of foster care was often complicated by the foster carer not having the right skills or support to meet the young person's needs, leading to conflict and tension. Some of the young people we spoke to also felt that being a foster carer was too often seen as a job role rather than as a parental role. And the third pathway, tenancy breakdown. Some of the young people we worked with who worked with us on this research expressed difficulties in maintaining a tenancy. This often came down to a lack of support to meet their need, and practitioners we spoke to highlighted a lack of support options or no appropriate support being available to help neurodivergent young people maintain a tenancy. They highlighted issues such as a lack of life skills-based support, which young people may have been unable to learn during a turbulent childhood. This was echoed by a young person who felt that if they had been left unprepared when placed in inappropriate accommodation upon leaving foster care. This was often exacerbated by executive dysfunction, which made maintaining a tenancy difficult, particularly without support. And from our point of view at EYHC, it is clear that the current system does not provide sufficient support for neurodivergent young people. There is a need for this system to be evaluated to ensure there is a sufficient provision of services to allow these young people to handle the challenges they face in their everyday life. The following passage is from one of our peer researchers explaining their experience of navigating a neurotypical world as a neurodiverse young person.
Many neurodivergent people face ableist abuse and alienation within our families and beyond. Part of this is that we don't conform to neurotypical standards, either because we are unable to do so, or because we reject the structures that place this expectation upon us. We are often subjected to mistreatment, overstimulation, and damage by parents or caregivers, whether this is out of malice, carelessness, or neglect. This can cause meltdowns which place us in a state of extreme dysregulation through an involuntary response to stresses and triggers. We are subsequently punished, physically, socially, or otherwise, for these unavoidable reactions to overwhelming input, even though they are traumatic experiences beyond our control. Repeatedly being pushed to a state beyond what we are capable of dealing with is incredibly harmful. It leads us to operate from a state of hypervigilance, which further increases tension and distrust within a family setting, and home situations can eventually escalate beyond the point of recovery. These experiences don't exclusively happen at home. Education, healthcare, and social settings can also have the same or similar impact. But when our homes aren't safe places, we are more likely to be driven towards dangerous situations, including homelessness.
So, the third section that our peer researchers wanted to explore was what young people's experiences looked like when they looked to access support. And the adjectives on this screen are from young people as to how they felt they were often perceived by the adults in their life. So adults who embody part of the system that they're trying to navigate. But if we turn now to look at and think about our nervous systems and emotions, we need to think about the young people who are accessing support. A number of the young people we spoke to were undiagnosed and were lacking a formal support for their condition. A number had multiple traumas, and a number made reference to suffering of their mental health. And it's important to remember that at the point of engaging with services, young people are in crisis. Making a homelessness application for many of these young people will be one of the lowest and most stressful moments of their lives. So we can only imagine what must be going on inside those young people and how dysregulated their nervous systems must be at the point of trying to engage with services. If we look to the continuum at the bottom of the slide, our nervous system operates on a continuum from calm to terror. And when we're in a state of calmness, we're able to access the higher parts of our brain responsible for rational and big picture thinking. We can absorb information and make decisions. However, as we move towards alarm, fear, and terror, this higher part starts shutting off, and we move towards our emotional brain, which is where practitioners will maybe see behavior characterized as being fight or flight, black and white thinking, or angry outbursts. Our services are currently not structured in a way that accounts for neurodivergent needs, nor do they account for the heightened states of arousal that people accessing their services will be in. In fact, the services often re-traumatize and induce further stress on already very vulnerable young people who have very formal and bureaucratic processes. The following quotes and videos from both young people and practitioners further illustrate this point.
But just admitting to the council like everything that's happened and then having to prove that you're homeless, there was a stress, and then them telling me that I had to go set up a universal account, and then it was very stressful. And having ADHD and autism and being stressed does not add up. Like, I was losing my patience, you know, I was paranoid that I wasn't going to get anywhere. I was like, oh no, they won't give me universal credit, you know, like I was really thinking negative thoughts.
And then in regards to the physical spaces of support where young people go to access support, one young person talked about that it was very scary going into the council building and declaring yourself homeless. The council building is like a big glass building. I mean, everything is just like this big, massive open room, and there's workers around, you know, in which I didn't expect to be put in that position. And one practitioner explained how they have witnessed young people coming into a very corporate, formal reception for appointments, pausing and walking back out.
But no, what did they send me? A notification under Part 2 of the Housing Wales Act 2014, Section 68, duty to secure interim accommodation for homelessness application has ended, and Section 73, duty to secure accommodation for a homeless applicant has ended. And I'm like, I can understand that to some extent, but then they're like all these sections and duties, and I'm like, I don't know none of this. Like.
And just a final quote from a practitioner on this part of the presentation. So practitioners explained that they've been with somebody when they phoned up a county council to make a homelessness statement, and they'd be completely overwhelmed and bamboozled with what's going on. Like, you're in crisis. Your support structures have gone, all of the kind of stuff that you've got, all the routine you've put in place to make you manage your life has just been removed. And when you've got to phone the council and just take in all this information and give over lots of personal information and then be placed in the emergency temporary accommodation. It's just there's an awful lot going on.
Hi, I'm Toby. I've been diagnosed with autism and fibromyalgia. I'm currently living in an inaccessible B&B. I cannot access most things that people can normally access due to my physical disabilities. My support system is in a different county than the one I've been placed in, so I have to travel over an hour away on the bus just to get to my support system. I've faced a lot of inaccessible buildings and services the whole time I've been homeless. To make things better for the nationwide community, we need more accessible accommodation, we need to be listened to properly, and we need to be allowed to easily and quickly access our support networks, even if our previous addresses were in a different county. Thank you.
So if we turn quickly now to look at the barriers and things from a practitioner's perspective. So during our focus groups, we spoke to practitioners supporting young people about their experiences, and this is what they said about the process. And it's important to reference, I think, from the workshops, just for context, that practitioners are currently working in. They're constantly being asked to do more with less resource, and the main takeaways from these workshops centered around lack of capacity, lack of resource, and it was also noted around the increasing maybe complexity of the people that are coming into the service needing that support. There's an appreciation from practitioners that paperwork is difficult to understand for anyone, neurodivergent or not, but there's this tension as they're legally obliged to send down sections and duties, and that this barrier can lead to information failure, increased anxiety and disengagement on behalf of the young person. Practitioners were unsure how easily young people could understand their personal housing plans. They said that sometimes young people, especially those who are undiagnosed, refuse support in working through them. And as everything is evidence-based in housing, officers could technically discharge duties if young people had not followed their personal housing plans, which we heard left a lot of neurodivergent young people without a diagnosis in very precarious situations. And again, in regards to young people who are undiagnosed, practitioners explained this tension that existed between the lack of diagnosis, meaning a lower rate of affordability in regards to housing options, with then the only available option to the young person being shared accommodation, even if this is known to the young person and the practitioner to be completely and wholly inappropriate, which leads to the quote on the screen from a practitioner who stated that we do sometimes see young people that are just closing down their housing applications and saying, well, if you're not able to give me what I need, I'll carry on sofa surfing or just manage. And that's how they remain homeless, basically because we can't give them what they need. There's also, and there's just another quote here about practitioners' experiences. And they said, it's not an excuse, but there's no point sugarcoating it. I don't think that the individual caseworkers have got the time they need to spend with people and to make sure that they understand and to keep on reminding them about what they need to do. There's just not the capacity to. Things like we've mentioned about needing to remind people about what we've been asked to do that week or what the next stage is, but just isn't the capacity to do that, especially in a manner that might be more understandable for people who are neurodivergent. So I think that's probably the biggest issue, and in terms of housing options at the moment anyway. And if we just pause to think here about the whole system approach, it's really important to note that for services to actually work and serve young people, we need this whole system approach. It can't just be one sector or service becoming more neurodiversity-friendly, and the emphasis cannot fall on the young person to be able to determine which part of a system is which department of a council is which. The lack of trust the young people we spoke to had in the system was overwhelming, and where one service fails a young person, that has a detrimental effect on all other services. Because, as one practitioner put it, the service is only as good as the weakest link in the chain. And I think this final quote from a practitioner really embodies the difficulties that local authorities are currently facing in regards both to work into this whole system approach, but also in regards to the stretched budgets that they're having to work to currently. So as this practitioner explained, it's, everyone's saying this person should pay for it, housing should pay for it, but actually it needs to be an integrated approach, because of the housing they present to us and we have to house them somewhere, but the housing that we're offering isn't appropriate, it isn't adequate, and they're still going out and offending. They're still calling the crisis team, they're still using drugs because we haven't got it right, and we just need a more joined up approach to working really, and it's really basic, but it isn't. It's an unbelievable amount of work to get social care to buy in, and the police, probation to buy in, and mental health teams to buy in. It's just so hard, and I thought, it's above my pay scale. So, if we now turn our focus to the final part of research, which is on how we become more neurodiversity friendly in our practice. And I think it's important to pause here to talk about why we can't fixate on diagnosis. We know that not every neurodivergent young person will be diagnosed. We know that not every neurodivergent young person will be aware they're neurodivergent and pursuing a diagnosis. Not every young person we spoke to wanted a diagnosis. And some young people want a diagnosis, but there are huge barriers in terms of capacity and access. Private diagnosis is very expensive, and we know just how long a diagnosis on the NHS can take. And we also know that not every young person will meet the threshold for a diagnosis, but they may still have neurodivergent traits and unmet needs. And viewing these issues through a social lens should allow us to move away from a medicalised focus on diagnosing individuals that focuses on their impairments to a system which is accessible by default, reducing the importance of a diagnosis when accessing services. And we also know, as we are told many times by young people and practitioners, that no two neurodivergent people are alike. Once you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. The same diagnosis presents itself differently in different people, and everyone has different cognitive makeup and different traits appear in different strengths in different people. And people cope and manage differently. We know that. Some people have a number of things going on alongside being neurodivergent, trauma, or potentially mental and physical health issues, for example, and people have different individual strengths and opportunities to realise them, different life experiences, different support networks, different personal circumstances, and that intersectionality all matters. So we at EOHC saw that we have this potentially tricky balance. We need to recognise that every young person will be different, so we need to be youth-led whilst also offering adjustment. So on the one hand, we need to be youth-led and dictated to by what the young people's wants and needs are, whilst also we need to be aware of the fact that at times not every young person will be aware of how their needs can best be met. So we need to work with a young person to figure out how best to support them with an array of options, so we have this balance between being youth-led whilst being proactive. The following slides go over a number of sensory adjustments and ways of communicating that young people we worked with thought were important to share. So in regards to sensory adjustments, the young people spoke about painting walls a neutral colour, avoiding putting too many posters or decorations on the wall, designating quiet spaces or providing earplugs, the fact that knocking can be triggering when in temporary accommodation, the fact that strong detergents, air fresheners and perfumes can also be overwhelming, as can harsh lights, and the potential to provide sensory items such as hammocks, swings, weighted blankets, fidget toys, and sensory projection lights, all of which can have a calming effect. And in regards to good communication, we cannot emphasize how much the young people mentioned the importance of being informed as to what was going on, and the importance of exploring the different mediums and working to the medium that best works for that young person. And as part of that, using simple language and, where possible, avoiding jargon and avoiding too legalized language. In regards to instructions, being clear and concise was really important, and also allowing the young person to draw whilst explaining, as that may be the way in which helps them process the information. Lists were mentioned numerous times by young people as a really powerful way of being able to process information, and then also asking the young person to summarize in their own words what was discussed in the meeting to ensure that understanding. Multiple reminders was referenced frequently, as was the importance of conducting meetings in sensory inclusive spaces and slowing down when talking and trying to add pauses. So, if we turn now to our recommendations for the final part of this presentation, and as I've mentioned, we worked with young people and practitioners within local authorities to put these recommendations together, which I think explains why so many are focused at local authorities. But we felt this was appropriate, given that cross-department, local authorities will be the face of the system that young people engage with. A number of these recommendations can be enabled by local authorities themselves. Others will need leadership, guidance, and funding from the Welsh Government. We've been rolling out recommendation-focused workshops to local authorities over the past few months, bringing together departments to explore the findings of various research in a space that allows for reflective practice and introspection of how their own current service is delivered. So please do get in touch if you're interested in these, in us coming to deliver these workshops in your local authority. And just to mention that we're continuing to work with young people on the dissemination of this research, looking to make it as accessible to them as possible. We are continuing to work with a number of local artists who are present and performed at the WAD launch, and we've begun a conversation with an animator about how we can present a number of these findings through animation. And we just thought it important to finish with the voice of one of the young people that we are privileged to work with on this research.
I want housing to understand that not every person's bad, and things not to judge a book by its cover, because some people can come across as angry, but if they pull their fingers out and actually try to support them in the right way and make sure that there's enough support in place that they don't fall, then people can actually prove to be so amazing. They can't just stick a young person into a flat and then leave them be. There needs to be a process leading up to before they get to a flat where they talk about everything and they go actually in depth. And then even when they're put into a flat or a house, the services need to be making sure there's support for at least the first year if possible, because it's the first year where things can go wrong, majorly wrong. And basically to just keep an open mind, because some people can come across as really naughty and a bit of an arse, but maybe they're the best people ever and they've just got their own shit going on.
So the final point of the presentation is just about keeping your eyes and minds open. Keeping your eyes open to be able to spot signs that a young person is potentially neurodivergent or is showing neurodivergent traits but need greater accessibility or inclusivity, but also about keeping your minds open, as every young person will be different and will have different needs. So it's about seeing the young person as they are and not making preconceptions based on their diagnosis. Thank you so much for listening. Diolch yn fawr am gwrando. We really hope that was of interest to you. We're always really keen to hear people's thoughts, feedback and comments on our work, so please do get in touch via the different communication channels on the screen if you'd like to reach out. And we're also always looking to foster new partnerships and working relationships. So if there's something you'd like to get to collaborate on, again, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Diolch yn fawr.